All right, now you want to talk about the other teams, Thorin?
Sure.
I mean, how long we got fucking got is the question.
So
10 minutes for all the other teams in the entire LCS?
We got hours, baby. You're the ones with the time commitments, not me.
Okay. All right. Well, let's start with the team you played in the finals, then,
Dangerous.
Team Liquid. Because as I said, even though everyone, and this is a thing fans keep getting caught in. I don't blame fans, by the way, because I know a fan just turns on the game and watches the game. He just sees what he sees on the screen. You know, he doesn't always know. Essentially, he can't know what he doesn't know. And so the problem fans always have is whenever, because at the moment with my sponsor, I'm doing a bunch of watch parties where I'm watching the games live with a bunch of people who just.
I think that
turning
stuff's
up with
really
randoms.
cool, right? Is that one of those things where it just came to you and you wondered why you hadn't done it sooner?
No, it was more like when they were saying, like, you know, what would the deliverables be to have the sponsor? I was trying to think, what could you really do? So what I thought was basically like, why not just do some things that effectively like might be interesting to try, but I've just never done before, basically. And then I actually didn't expect it to be fun, but actually it's fairly fun when you do it. Obviously, you get a cool group of people who have your vibe. Yeah, you get into the game. But basically, when I was doing it, when I'm talking with essentially people who there's a mixture. Some of them are like challenger players, some of them are just nobodies. Obviously, there's a tendency to do the sort of basically pretend like you're LS and just explain why every draft is bad and every player's a moron for not picking the absolute best player for that role. But I always keep having to tell these players, the problem is this, right? If we take the initial premise that this is really a top team in the region, and we know, as I said before, they are scrimming. So in this scenario here, this is where a fan won't think extra orders of effect on. In this scenario, as you said, if you're Team Liquid and you've won the upper bracket, there is nobody for you to practice except Team Liquid, except 100 Thieves and Cloud9. They're the only two teams you can scrim. So logically, if in the final the draft is incredibly weird to you every game from Team Liquid, it actually implies what I said earlier. They probably had a terrible time in scrims, specifically against this team, maybe even both teams, you never know. And then as a result, whatever the current meta is that they might have done even against a different opponent, they already know that doesn't work. So they've thrown that out the window like, yeah, you might not think this draft's good, but the odds are they've gone through this page, this page, this page, and this is just what's left. And it usually means, this is the key point I always make to like random fans, even to us it looks stupid, like why not do X? The point is they would have probably already tried X, and so even though to us it's inferior, this actually is their best solution. I know it seems impossible because you think they should have no chance, because dude, when I watch this particular series, like this makes me wonder if TL themselves actually really were that confident coming in this series. Like they looked scared in terms of how they played, how they drafted. What did you think of Team Liquid? Because before the finals, as you said about the upset, everyone would have said Team Liquid at a minimum wins in a close game, if not stomps, right?
Mm-hmm. I think the one advantage Team Liquid has that compared to generic team in a rough scenario like you're talking about is they could scrim both 100 Thieves and C9 if they wanted to. Obviously, they would be guarded about how much they did, just given how the schedule plays out. But two, their academy team is really strong by academy standards. All three teams have strong academy teams that were still in the runnings. TLA, I have a lot of respect for. Spawn is their coach, you know, the Oceanic caster. And they are a good team, and obviously they could plug and play players in the LCS as well. So I think that's a good scrim partner for them. Obviously, it's not, you know, the same as having a top LCS team, etc. I won't even include the asterisks. But what I will say is my guess is that mostly from playing against TLA, they looked at us and said, okay, how do we win against 100 Thieves? Obviously, part of it's going to be Alphari someday dynamic. You know, simple. It's what they did the previous best of 5. They're going to do it again. I'm guessing the second thing is and how it goes with, again, limited time, limited practice options is with your academy team, you can say you're playing these picks, right? Like you just kind of like the old MIG Blaze, MIG Frost, like one of the teams is cosplaying the opponent.
Yeah, you mimic our opponent. Yeah,
you know, we warm up with our academy team before every stage game. And we give them a set draft. You're playing these champs. It's what we expect the enemy to be playing today. And then it's not going to be a high quality game, but there's still going to be learnings from the set draft, right? Yes. And we've actually had games where like 9 out of the 10 champs are what we predicted the draft would be, which is always like, whoa, okay, like our prep's pretty good then. My guess is they went with TLA and said, it's a complete guess, there's no inside info here.
Yeah.
They went to TLA and said, okay, we need a scenario where we can get a draft win on red side because red side gives us counter pick against someday guaranteed. What can we leave open and beat? What is the champion we know 100 Thieves will first pick that we can have a strategy to beat? And clearly their answer was Viego. Like clearly they were like, okay, we need to be able to beat closes Viego. That's how we win the draft. It's beating Viego. There's no reason you would leave it open twice. It's an open and shut ban. if you're not having that strategy. And you do need to have a strategy like that in the best of five, especially when it's someone who knows your playbook by having scrimmed them and played them on stage a lot. And so,
by the way, sorry, I thought
Go
one
ahead,
thing I'd
go
just
ahead.
chuck in there is another detail, as you're talking about, in the sort of meta approach to how you think about competing. This is a really misunderstood point by fans. You know, when a fan does the thing where Champion X, pick whatever
how
you
did
want,
they get
Diego,
that pick? It's
yeah.
OP, and he's so good at it.
And they just say, it's such a strong champion, why not just ban it? What they don't get is this. How do you prepare if you don't know what you're going to ban until 1 second before? You can't. So what you actually do, genuinely, especially, by the way, for roles you can't even pinch at the moment, is you explicitly, as Papa says, let them have the champion you know they want. Because since they want it, it becomes now predictable they will take it, which means you can actually prepare a counter. Now, listen, yes, you can debate whether the counter is good enough, but it's actually a legitimate strategy. In fact, you have to sometimes employ it. It's not as simple, obviously, as just ban all the OPs, is it?
Well, especially if you're committing to red side. Red side is the counter pick side. So even when you're doing draft prep, you can't prep as much for red side because you don't know what they're going to ban because the blue side has more ban flexibility, and you don't know what they'll first pick because it, again, depends on the traits. So red side bans is usually 1 to 2 locked bans where it's like, okay, we're coming in, but we will not play against this champ. And then you need space for a reaction ban. You're kind of like if team on blue side, what's a famous one to think about here? It's like if blue side team bans Gnar, they probably want to first pick Renekton. So now you need space to be able to ban Renekton or a strategy to play into Renekton. But you can't prep a Renekton ban because you don't know if they'll ban Gnar and things like that. It's one of those things where it's like you need space. And the more flexible your team is, the more space you have. If you have 3 locked bans on blue side and red side, most famous example would be Cloud9 at 2018 Worlds. Kind of crazy they went as far as they did to semis when they couldn't play, the Aurelia, Kali stuff.
Bunch of champions.
But with 3 locked bans, winning best of 5s is basically impossible if it's blue-red side. But sometimes that'll happen, right? It's like, I got good players, but like they just can't play these picks. That's going to be a reason you struggle. For red side, they have to build out a red side draft. 'Cause, right, you want to win a best of 5 to win the whole fucking title, right? You need to know that an enemy team will first pick this champ no matter what, because then you can actually build it out. If it's, well, we don't know if they'll take Viego or Lee Sin first pick, then suddenly that affects the texture of all of your other red side picks, right? But if it's, we believe this team will pick Viego, let us be able to beat Viego, have confidence to beat Viego, then that's the thing that they clearly, in my opinion, again, fully speculating, spent the whole week prepping for is the Viego open scenario. And that's the only reason why you would do it twice. Like, it's not like they misbanned Viego and then misbanned Viego again, right? That's not a valid reason for Viego to be left open twice. It's, we can handle Viego on red side, plus we get counterpick again someday, would have been their strategy. And they would have practiced probably against TLA, maybe even C9. I'm not aware of who they were scrimming or whatever. And then whoever else to try to keep that open, they would have kept it in mind around solo queue practice. It would have been communicated to the players, guys, are you bought in on this? We're leaving open Viego. And the players would have agreed to it. So that's what's required to get there. And then obviously if closer smurfs on Viego, all you can do is have egg on your face and say, that was our best way to win and it didn't work, And that's with limited practice partners. Like if this was in Asia and you could be practicing against other top world teams with Viego open, maybe you get a different read than your academy team. But you get what you get, right? And it turns out that bet was wrong in this case.
By the way, being as we're talking about jungle champions, just for the example, and obviously Closer was like the MVP of the final, like I think I have to ask a question to you. I want to get your take on Santorin, because the problem is this. On the one hand, I will definitely give him an asterisk, which is he didn't play most of the regular split. He's obviously had the health issues. It's not. I can't judge him like he's in like this is the best ever version of Santorin and this is just who he is forever. But I will say this: he looked like he was doing really well in most of the other playoff series. He was actually like sometimes one of the outstanding players. But in this final, I actually was really disturbed even by just even the drafting, dude. Like, why was he playing Lee Sin in these Lee Sin games hurt my soul. Like, it's like I said on Twitter, mate. considering Closer played Lee Sin in game 3, you wouldn't even believe it was the same champion, dude, when these two players played it. Like, I don't think I ever saw like a fucking big kick from Santorin. It didn't really even feel like, if you think of the champions in the meta, dude, where's he playing the Trundle and the fucking Sejuani, all the stuff that's like in his wheelhouse? That felt like a really weird angle that they went with because they were, like, here's the thing. I'd get it, Puppet, if it was a draft scenario and they're picking, you know, the Lee Sin first away from Closer. Like, that has a logic to it. But they were doing it as a response most of the time, even. What do you think on it?
Again, they're red side, right? Because they want to be on red side, so you don't really get to first pick things. You're responding. What I will say is that we banned Trundle on blue twice, so obviously we know he's a big Trundle player. And then specifically to the Viego sense, it's a Viego Lee Sin trade, right? In most drafts, you see Viego and Lee Sin because there's like nuances of the 1v1 matchup, there's nuances of the skirmishing, there's nuances of the team fight that I don't want to get into. No reason to reveal info just because we're still active in the season. But basically, it's a very common trade to take the Lee Sin and give up the Viego and theoretically get that one more pick, right? Like, okay, well, if we can nullify Viego because we practice against it a lot, plus like Lee Sin has its own strengths, it's going to be better on red side, plus we get that counter pick is the scenario there. Now, is Santorin a notorious Lee Sin player? No, it's not his comfort. Like, that's, again, hey guys, here's our draft plan to beat 100 Thieves. Are you bought into this? Santorin, you're going to be on Lee Sin. That's the trade we're going for. Are you bought into this? He as a player, he's obviously in the Yankos kind of like school of thought, right? Like a more lane focused player rather than own advantage player. He was bought into that plan. All their practice indicated that would be their best route to win. Was it the wrong bet to take? Easy to say now, yes, right? Because it didn't work. But he was trying to play a role for that series, and he wasn't able to play it as good as Closer was. So I think it's fine to criticize the individual player, but again, being on the team side now, you see the bigger picture of how things get to where they get to, and then all you can really do afterwards is take the result and evaluate the process that led you to like, this is our draft scenario, and then have better scenarios going forward. Because again, the silver lining here is that Team Liquid do get to learn from this and go to Worlds, and I know their eyes are on Worlds more closely than a summer title. Whereas for us, it's our first ever title, so obviously the significance there is always going to be different.
By the way, since you mentioned that, I will throw in for context. Like, that is one thing I'm not a fan of personally. Like, even though in theory every pro, look, until you're eliminated, you want to win the championship, you want to be a champion of your region, blah blah blah. For some reason, it did actually, I thought, make the ambience of the games not as exciting. That, as we talk about here, like whoever's in the finals already at Worlds, no matter what, like they can't, essentially they're already going home with something, as it were. Like, in that sense, even though I wasn't a huge fan of Gauntlet, I would prefer it if sort of like only summer winner was Worlds and then the rest sort of still played for it after, so they were still hyping all the matches.
Here's my opinion on that. I think that in COVID, valid concern. I think actually I felt the same, but let's consider, I guess we'll call it a perfect world scenario because we don't know what the future holds in the immediate term. Perfect world scenario. You think of playoffs and it's like best of fives are cool, but it's building hype finals weekend, right? Then you have one crescendo. How about we're in the studio, the last matches we play in the studio are these two teams are going to Worlds. Or, I mean, let's say 3 of the last best of fives are these teams are going to Worlds. Worlds is on the line. Fucking insanely hype, right? We're going to Worlds. Everybody in the world knows Worlds is like the goal. Hype. Then we fly over to New Jersey in front of fans, and who the fuck is going to win North America? Fans are there. Holy shit, it's so hype. That's how it's supposed to be, is you get an early crescendo, which is super hype, and then you get the fucking trophy moment in front of 8,000 fans. So hype again. Now, when it's all in the studio, then you're right. I would say that the end hype, like there's the only reason there's 2,500-3,000 comments on the thread is because Team Liquid was upset by a team that had never won, that has a lot of baggage, 3-0. So obviously it's like it's basically the same as when I cast the 93-minute Jin Air SKT game. It's an I was there moment where you're like, holy shit, I was there when 100 Thieves won their first title as an upset, rather than like the glitz and glamour that was lost. So that's the defense I'll give to Riot is that I think without COVID, the format has more epic moments that you have to be a part of. World's qualification, is it my team or the enemy team? Super fucking hype. Who's the winner in front of a crowd? Super fucking hype. But when it's all in the studio, it's going to be more muted. And that's why people are coming away now just being like, no, it's shit. It's like, I agree that you have a valid feeling that it did feel sucky right now, but that doesn't mean that the format is wrong. Can the format change? Is there another way? I'm not a smart bracketologist person. That's probably more a Monty thing. But I think that it's one of those like let's say TL got a meta misread about leaving open Viego because they didn't have the player qualities. I think this is like a bracket misread just because COVID is a big asterisk on how people are reflecting on the format here.
What do you think, Monty, about Team Liquid overall? I mean, their performance in the final was rogue-esque in that regard, in like the earlier conversation.
So I found it funny because like a lot of the comments from the last show, we were talking about Team Liquid.
I love this, dude. I know exactly where you're going. They were all that we're totally wrong on our read, and that we just implied Team Liquid's a team that's not very proactive and let the other team into them. Reality's nice sometimes, isn't it? It's the way it plays out. How are UTL fans liking that, by the way? How do you enjoy how proactive your team work? Give me a fucking... I know where you were going there, Monty. Exactly. It was meant to want it in the context.
I mean, I think like Team Liquid in this series, I think overall in the playoffs, they were much more proactive, but I also think a lot of that was, as we talked about, them not having their complete team throughout most of the season, and also Jensen's individual underperformance during the regular season. We always knew he could turn it on, and he did at the start of the playoffs. He was significantly better on an individual basis than he had been previously. But at the same time, like, it was unrealistic to think that this team was going to be able to develop strong early game synergy over the course of a playoff run where Santorin had just gotten back with the team and redeveloping to jungle mid synergy and top jungle synergy in a meta that is deeply requiring of those two factors. They were always going to be playing at a disadvantage, and they were always going to have to play more passively as a result of that.
Here's what I'll say is that when I heard you, Monty, like the specific language you used to describe TL clearly triggered some fans. I think that I actually
never do that.
Here's the honest thought though. I was also similar to the fans being like, it doesn't sound like Monty is describing this TL to me from my standpoint as well.
How would you describe them?
So here's where I'll divide is like when TL get to play the game style they want to play. When it's carry versus carry top lane and we've got Alphari and they don't have Alphari, I actually think that the old adage of like, you know, scaling for late game, impact on weak side, double lift carrying, which I think is the similar language you would use to describe that team, is similarly how you describe this team. And that's just word choice, and the fact that we've heard people talk about Team Liquid style for so many years doesn't apply. Like, I think they actually do make smart punishes. Santorin's a sort of jungler that kind of like, he's very smart. I think that's the thing about him, is like he has a lot of like, this is what a normal jungler will do, and this is how a normal jungler will path, and this is when they'll be there. And so I'll just be over here where I shouldn't be in order to punish them in a way they wouldn't expect. And I think when he disrupts that, and then he's there to dive top on every stacked wave, because Alphari is going to win out and have good wave management and get stacked waves, then I think TL does punish and play proactively well.
Sure.
And if
I think that's what we saw in the last series.
getting first turret, I don't think your descriptors apply to them very well. And obviously in the recent time, he's been getting a lot of first turrets, or at least getting good advantages. However, when things are disrupted, when it's no longer this Alphari Santorin strong synergy, which unfortunately for them has happened at spring playoffs, you know, with Santorin's sickness, and then throughout the course of summer, it kind of makes sense that the richness of their plan B and plan C is going to be falling back on what used to work for the squad, regardless of who their top laner was, right? And I think that's kind of what you saw is when it's Shen into Camille and they weren't expecting that, or when there's a 4-man dive they couldn't outplay, or 4 people die, like then suddenly it's like, well, I hope they make a mistake. And so I think the fundamental DNA is there, but I also get the fans kind of calling you out in that fundamental DNA didn't have to be on display too much recently, because they have actually been good at kind of reinventing.
Awfully convenient, isn't it?
No,
Awfully convenient. Here's the thing. I'm not going to go, let's just not talk about the last 2 weeks of Team Liquid. Let's just talk about them a month ago. Well, how would that make any sense?
I mean, there's only been a month with Santorin and Alfari in the lineup, right? At least in recent history. And I think the first 2 weeks and some signs, I guess, of the last best of 5, you saw the Team Liquid that they were praising. Then, yeah, our losses against them and the finals, it's very easy to see the other side. And it's like, okay, there was 4 weeks, 2 weeks looked good, 2 weeks looked kind of like old habits. What do I make of it? I'm biased. I saw the scrims. Like I knew that they were very much different team than they were when I was watching them just choke out my 2020 lineup a year ago. But that's the thing, is like words wash over people based on their subjective experience. And so TL fan who watched their recent series, and yes, Alfari's back. Yes, it's the team I expected. Look at what we did in these 2 weeks. That's going to be the totality that they're like, that's tonally off to what I've just been seeing and focusing on. Whereas for me, it's like, I saw the scrims, so it's going to be tonally off from the scrims I saw. So it's just the reality of language and kind of like incomplete information is that people will jump on somebody what just doesn't fit where they're at and be partly right and partly wrong. That's kind of the beautiful thing about League and how complex it is, and the fact that you can't see it all on one screen at the same time. It's pretty easy to be partly right and partly wrong about League, and that's what I think infuriates people like LS who try to be by the book.
Yes.
Is like, you know, he sees it how he sees it with perfect information and ability to play every champ, and it's like, but isn't the beautiful thing about League that we have imprecise information and that people can't play every champ? Because then it is just so much more rich than just the algebra. So the champs left.
On these lines is actually why I think an underrated aspect of why American football is popular with Americans. It's very underrated because it's counterintuitive. It's the fact that it's a similar scenario, Papa. It's such an incredibly complicated game that anyone can have an opinion, and it could be right. You know, it's all over the place. Essentially, you could be right in this area, but wrong in that one. Or maybe you know about wide receivers, but you don't know about the defense. You know what I mean? Like, there's so much.
Nuance, right? And people will clip out this is like an affront on LS or anything. Nick's a great friend of mine.
No, they'll probably be clipping the early part. Here's what I'll or some shit, you know, like that.
Here's what I'll say is like, maybe to LS the ability to like consider the perfect scenarios and like architect the draft strategy to win that is the thing about League that he fucks with the most, that he loves the most.
Like
he always wants to reframe, like, this is some garbage. Let's reframe it to my parameters. And that's what he and if you listen to that and subscribe to that, great, you know? And then to me, it's like the imprecise stuff. Like, I think the words I used to describe League when Wards was removed was like, it's a combat puzzle where you can't know everything because you can't see everything. So how you process conditional info based on what you practiced and what you see and what you know about jungle pathing. Like, let me tell you, laners these days know so much more about expected jungle pathing of different champions and different players than players 3-4 years ago, because they never needed to know. When I started casting League, you just fucking clairvoyanced camps the whole time and always knew you were there. People baby rage. Every single pro player hates when Ashe is on the enemy team because it's unfair that you can see the enemy jungler and things like that. Like, you need so much more. The burden of knowledge around how people are expected to act is only going up over time. It's like the floor of knowledge you need to be successful is only going up at times. So that's the thing, is that I love the conditional info and I look to that, and that's how I'll reframe. And then LS loves the perfect info and the ideal case and reframe. And the fact that we can support both, and there's people who are willing to listen to me yammer on about my style and LS yammer on about his style, just shows that we got a pretty good game to talk about. So that's, again, why I look back and smile that randomly installing League of Legends 10 years ago, 11 years ago has led to conversations like this.
Want to see more cool, funny, interesting clips based on topics from my content? Well, subscribe to this channel then, or, you know, be a pleb and don't.